Tossed and tumble on a sleepless bed, but you're wasting your time trying to lose the blues.
Welcome, Calvin, to It's Your Time You're Wasting. And I'm sorry if we've wasted too much of your time already, but welcome anyway. By the way, when people see our names together on the screen, they'll probably think we're related in some way. And I just want to say, as far as I'm aware, we're not, are we? I don't think so.
We could be distant cousins, Martin.
You never know. You never know. Now, you used to be a computer science teacher, as far as I'm aware, and to give it some sort of sense of where we are now, you're no longer a computer science teacher, and I think you've given it up to pursue a higher calling, the cloth. Tell me, what's happening?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here. I have just entered seminary, so I am training toward holy orders. I am looking, God willing, to become an ordained priest at some point. And I think this, for me, is an extension of my vocation. So I've always been teaching. Well, I've been teaching for the last few years, and that's been a strong focus on academic excellence, as it should be. But I feel like there's part of our education system missing. And for me, that is the character, that is the Christian values and the ethics and morality around everything that we're doing. We're sending people out into society with amazing grades, but not particularly well-rounded individuals. And I think there's a gap there that needs to be plugged. So that's what I'm hoping I can have some impact on eventually.
It opens up all sorts of interesting areas for discussion there, including about religious education in schools, of course, and perhaps the government's new guidance on religion and sex education, for example. I take it you've had a look at what has been causing a bit of consternation in areas of social media over the past week or so. Can you tell me your angle on it, please?
Yeah, I think it's problematic from the beginning. So this new Relationship and Health and Sex Education Act was supposed to do a good thing, as all these things are. All these policies are well-intentioned, but it was supposed to have modern conversations around the family. And for me, that's very important because the family is the cornerstone of our society. And we need to have more conversations about the family structure. Not any particular family structure, but families in general. We need to emphasize the importance of that because that's what our communities are built on. But this new act suggests that taking what was, we've always had sex education in secondary, it's saying taking that, expanding that into relationship and sex education and teaching it all throughout school. So what we're going to end up with is, what we're seeing already is really bizarre things like teaching how to masturbate in primary school, which I think is completely inappropriate for a whole host of reasons. But why it's extra problematic is because in this new legislation, it's now illegal for parents to remove their children from sex education classes. And that's, parental rights and responsibilities are important because they are the family structure. And I think taking those rights and responsibilities away and putting them on the state is troubling because the state should be a safety net for families. It shouldn't replace families. But what we saw when this act came into play is that schools are quickly struggling to adapt. They have to teach this stuff, so they're using outside resources, as schools often do, go on TES and download some resources. We're seeing outside agencies being brought in, and I'm talking about companies like organizations like Stonewall and Mermaids that have very political agendas, especially when it comes to queer theory and gender theory and these ideologies that are not completely scientifically backed, but are ideas more than anything. And we're seeing things that are ideas being taught as facts. And that's very troubling. And so the government came out with further guidance that said, if you're teaching political ideas, it has to be balanced. You can't teach political ideas as facts. And that's, if you do, you're in breach of the 1996 Education Act, which, of course, by the name has been around for a long time. It's a shame that schools needed reminding of this, but they do. And when we talk about political neutrality, we're not talking about being apolitical as in not partisan politics. We're talking about politics in general. So ideas and thoughts being taught as facts. Everything needs to be challenged. Everything needs to be balanced. And we haven't seen that in RSHE or RHSE so far. So the government brought it out for that reason. But why I'm so interested in it is because it enables us to push this conversation again and reminding schools that they do have to be politically neutral. And we've seen the backlash on Twitter, for example, on social media and in the media has been horrendous. A lot of teachers are exposing themselves now, saying, I've been promoting Marxism or communism, or I've been promoting against capitalism for all these years, and I will continue to do so, or I will stop teaching. It's like, well, first of all, what you've been doing is wrong. But there are plenty of ways that you can address. If you think capitalism is an issue, you can address capitalism in schools appropriately. What you can't do is indoctrinate young people to your way of thinking politically. That's not okay. And I think, I've been talking about this for years at education conferences and in the media, talking about how I think schools are indoctrinating children. And I think that a lot of that comes from the fact that 70 to 80 to almost 90% of teachers are left-leaning and Remain voters. That wouldn't be an issue normally if they weren't pushing those views. But from what I've seen in my anecdotal experiences, those views are being pushed onto young people. And that is, by definition, indoctrination. And it's not okay. It's not right. And now these people are exposing themselves. And I do want to clarify that I'm not teacher bashing. I think teachers are the hardest working individuals I've ever had the privilege of working with. I've worked in industry, I've worked in schools, and teachers are fantastic. But there is a groupthink. There's a hive mind mentality that, yeah, we're all right because we all agree and we're all left wing, we're all Remainers. Brexit's evil, Tories are evil, and they're wrong. So it's okay to talk about them in a negative way. It's okay to have this approach. And actually, it's not. And we need to remind them of that. And I think the government's done well in this guidance, even though they didn't do too well in launching this Relationship and Sex Education Act in the first place. So they've balanced it out a bit. But where I come into this is, obviously it's Black History Month at the moment in October, which also has is problematic for a whole host of reasons. But what I want to make clear is that schools don't need to be teaching political ideas as facts regarding Black History Month. It's okay to address it if you must. A lot of good schools don't. Michaela School, at which I'm a governor, don't even address Black History Month because it's pointless. We teach history on the curriculum anyway. It's very broad, it's very balanced. We don't need to have a specific month for a specific race. As a Black person, I find that troubling anyway. Is that to say that my British history isn't my history? I have to have my own special Black history. But before I go off on a tangent, what I'm saying here is that if we're going to teach Black history, do it right. So I've teamed up with some other educationists to provide some positive resources that schools can pick up and use, and they'll talk about, in one I created, we talk about the Commonwealth contribution to World War II. So, continuing the stories of brave service personnel who gave the ultimate sacrifice to defend our rights, our freedoms, and British values and the things that we believe in, and helped shape Britain to be the nation that it is today. I talk about Jamaican RAF pilots. I talk about Australian soldiers. So it's not about race, but it is about a diverse contribution. And that's what I think we need to be doing. So rather than saying what you're doing is wrong, what I've tried to do is say, here are some positive alternatives to help if you really want to teach Black History Month without compromising yourself by teaching critical race theory, these things, these ideas like white privilege, without teaching them as a fact and compromising yourself politically and thus breaking the law. Here are other ways of going about it. So Don't Divide Us is a campaign group that we've collated some resources and created some to help schools, and hopefully that will help teachers and schools, but also parents as well. A lot of parents have been reaching out to me and reaching out to our group and saying, our school are teaching political content. They're teaching white fragility. They're upsetting young white kids and telling them, what, you're racist, you're unconsciously racist if you're not even overtly racist, and upsetting the balance and stoking racial tensions where there were none, and telling Black kids that they're oppressed, they'll never amount to anything because this systemic racism in this country is holding them back. And again, I think that's a negative mindset. Flip it around. Sorry,
Calvin, that was a very wide-ranging answer to my question. Thank you very much for filling out the whole picture, if you like.
No, not at all.
The whole thing that you are
I can talk about that all day, Martin.
A couple of questions there. One of which is about relationships and family. Now, I live in a road where just up the road, my neighbours and the next door neighbours was the couple next door are two men and have a child, and the couple next door to them are two women, and they have a child as well. So they're family units that are same sex. Now, are you saying that those units should not be taught in schools? Are you saying that they should be taught as not normal or not family structures? Or are you happy to say that these are perfectly legitimate family structures, for example, and it's the family idea of it that's more important? But what about then the families which are even more untraditional, perhaps where you could say that I don't know how far you want to put it, but perhaps a trans couple, etc., etc. But you tell me.
It's a very good question. To me, the most important thing is family. All the evidence suggests that kids that come from a stable family environment do better in school and later in life. And if you have a broken family, that's not to say that single parents are bad or wrong or anything, but if there is a breakdown in the family, that is detrimental to the child. We have all the evidence to back that up. So what we need to do is emphasize how important maintaining a stable family is. I'm not here to prescribe what type of family that might be. If that's 2 men, 2 women, you've got a very diverse neighborhood, by the way. That's it is what it is. All I'm saying is that having 2 parents, looking after a child, splitting the workload helps. The stats back that up. But that's not what relationship and sex education is pushing. A lot of these resources are saying, if you've got a tomboy as a daughter, you've got a girl that's maybe likes playing with action men instead of Barbies, perhaps she's in the wrong body. And it's all about pushing that gender theory in that, we should look at stopping using puberty blockers to stop that young woman from becoming a woman, and that's very problematic to me.
Okay, and before we get into that, again, we're opening up a huge.
There's so many cans of worms.
huge problems for perhaps some of our viewers on these things. What I am interested there, you're saying about the single parent family and the problems that can engender further on down the line for a child who comes from that background, which is not necessarily, of course, all children who come from that background are going to go through problems necessarily because of that, and some with come from a background of a heterosexual couple might have problems because of the couple not getting on, etc., or abusive. All these things that could be happening in the family home. Are you suggesting in the lessons that how would a child from a single parent background feel if they're being taught that this is not necessarily the ideal background to come from?
I'm not saying that's something we need to teach. I'm just saying that's something we need to promote. We need to promote families as a society, as a community. I don't think we need to teach necessarily that this is a better way of having a family. I think as a society, we need to promote family values. There's a difference there. I'm not saying any of the books we use in school should prescribe any particular model of family, none whatsoever. And, like you said, people from 2-parent families may go through difficulties. Likewise, people from single parent families, I was from one myself, had a very good childhood, very good upbringing. It's not to say that that's not possible. All I'm saying is the stats and the evidence suggest that kids that come from a stable family home with 2 parents do a lot better because they've got more support, and more support can never be a bad thing, can it?
And and as you say, those families could be same-sex families as far as you're concerned, same-sex parents. And that still offers some sort of stability that you suggest is an important thing. Is this politically biased, though? Is this very much from the right? Family values, a conservative, traditional way of seeing the world. Is this in itself politically biased as a way of teaching children that these things might be the way forward?
Well, I'm an evidence-informed practitioner, and I think if the evidence suggests that a strong family unit is the best way to raise a family, then so be it. But yeah, it is politically biased. It is because it's British values, it's Christian values, and British values are based on Christian values, and to deny that is nonsensical. But it's not politically biased in the sense that it's pushing ideas as facts, because we're using evidence.
Okay, so if the evidence, so is British values scientific? I mean,
No,
I'm not quite sure on that. What do you mean?
Not
The evidence?
entirely, but in this instance, they do line up, and that helps. But where I'm talking about political issues, I'm talking about modern issues that haven't been challenged, haven't been debated, and have quite often been debunked and aren't scientifically backed up, such as gender theory, such as critical race theory. Critical race theory is the one I talk about most because I have most experience in it. But to teach these things to young people when it could be potentially detrimental to their well-being is not good.
Okay, but should schools teach critical race theory, but in a context of lots of other theories, for example?
They can teach about critical race theory, but I wouldn't say you should teach critical race theory. I wouldn't like to see my kids, if I ever have kids, being told that If they're white, they're privileged by the color of their skin, and if they're black, they're oppressed and held back by a racist society. Because I don't believe we live in a racist society. I do think there are elements of racism that we need to work on, but this isn't a racist country. It's tolerant, it's inclusive, it's diverse, it's amazing. That's why I live here.
But there are elements of racism within the society. I think you'd agree with that, and that has to be challenged in some way. And schools are in an awkward position here because perhaps they haven't got the breadth of knowledge within the school, within the staff, perhaps, or within the materials that are out there, which is why they're reaching out for certain materials from certain organisations. Is that
Right.
how you?
No, I think if we see racism in school, we address it. I've worked in a lot of London schools. Most of the racism I've experienced in London schools has been anti-Semitism, and wherever I've seen it, I've stumped it out. But it's so that we can do as teachers, yes. But at the same time, schools aren't here to fix societal problems. Schools are here to pass on knowledge, right? It's not our job to fix the remaining issues of racism in society. That's our job as a society, as a group of British subjects to work on. I don't think schools can fix every problem. Like I said earlier, we as a people need to promote family values, but I don't know if that's necessarily the job of a school.
But a school, you talked about schools and character at the beginning of what we're talking about. Schools do have a moral purpose about them, a moral code, if you like, that you should not hit each other, you should not swear, you should not do this, you should not do that. You should behave lovingly, with care, behave nicely, whatever words is put into. I think it's nice is the one that mentioned at Michaela, I think, is a word they mentioned in part of their
Work hard, be kind.
Yeah, that's right, be kind. So there is some sort of elements of direction towards the way we should treat each other. So there's a moral code behind this. And when to use a well-worn phrase, when the personal becomes political, when these two things sort of coincide, where are the lines drawn?
Where are they drawn, indeed? I think there is a part to play there, but you have to know the moral code going into it, right? So for example, if I'm working in a Church of England school, I'm going to know that they're teaching Christian values, or they should be. Whereas if I'm working in a state school, a secular state school, the values shouldn't be prescribed to one particular religion or faith or anything like that. So we kind of have to know as parents, when we're choosing where to send our children, what those moral values are. And if they're reactionary, as we've seen this year with lots of schools just instantly changing what they believe and what they teach based on protests and riots, then I'm not sure that's a good model. That's not best practice.
Okay, so but a school should be anti-racist, and
No,
so it should be pro-racist. I mean, it should be pro-racist, so therefore it is anti-racist. But is there a line with what anti-racism means to you?
Yeah, I don't agree with anti-racism. I think by default, most people are against racism, but that's not the same as anti-racism. Anti-racism has come to mean something else. That is a proactive movement that is, again, steeped in critical race theory and trying to break down this so-called racist society by essentially removing white people and replacing them with people of color. And I don't think that's a positive approach. I think that's an attempt to overcompensate and is going to cause further division. And as we've seen, this year alone, I've experienced more racism than I have in my entire adult life as a result of Black Lives Matter riots and these people stoking divisions, stoking tension.
Right, I'm quite. There's such a wide range of conversations we're having here, and it's quite difficult to pin it down. But we seem to have sort of come into the racism question. Have you read Paul Gilroy, by the way?
No.
Right, he's an interesting writer on these matters. One of the things he says, which is very important, is what's the end game?
Indeed.
What do you want things to end up like?
Yeah.
And that's a pointed question, I think. What's your end game?
See, I think we're very close to where we need to be. I think we often focus on the problems, and we forget to look at where we've come from. I think, my grandfather came over here as an immigrant from Jamaica. It was a tough place as a black man in an all-white town. And for my father growing up, it was less so. It's a bit better. And for me, even better. I did have a lot of racial abuse growing up, but it was so much better than my grandfather. So the progress we've made as a country, A, first of all, needs to be celebrated, and then B, we can focus on the remaining aspects that need to be fixed. But the end game for me is equality of opportunity, not equal outcomes. I don't think every single sector needs to look exactly the same. We don't need, like, representation, for example. I don't believe that 15% of head teachers or school governors need to be black or minority ethnic. I don't think equal outcomes is realistic. I think equal opportunities is what we want. If I, as a black teacher, want to become a head teacher, I should be able to do that. But making assumptions and saying, why don't we have more black head teachers? Well, who's to say that all the black teachers want to become head teachers? Who's to say that that's what we perceive as a model of success? We can't just assume that there are barriers in place and try to rip people down and put quotas and ratios in. That's what I worry about. I don't believe in quotas, because I'd love to live in a meritocratic society. We're not quite there, but that's the direction I think we're going in.
And if we look at the outcomes and we just see a lot of white men in places, or even white middle-class men, or white people from rich backgrounds, or in the end, just people from middle-class backgrounds doing better than people from working-class backgrounds, which it might not be about race in those terms at all. In fact, it's about class, perhaps. Is that a good outcome, or is there something we should do to change the class structures in society in the way that it seems to people who are of a higher class, whatever that means, seem to do better generally, no matter how meritocratic we say the society is? Is that a good outcome, or do we need to do something about class?
I think you're getting there. I think, class plays a much larger factor than race does in our society. And that if we level that out a bit, that might help, or plug that gap a bit, it might help. But I just look at the stats. Everything we do should be evidence informed. And I look at the information we have, from the DFE or from ONS, that suggests that, for example, black African kids are exceeding all throughout primary school, all throughout secondary school, and twice as likely to go to university than white British kids. So again, the race issue isn't so much there, but when we look at white working class boys, we see that the class does play an issue, and that people are being held down from a working class background. So maybe there are some things we need to work on around class, much more than we need to work on around race.
And is that political? Could it have you come out as a Marxist here, Marxist revolutionary perhaps at the end?
Never. Equal opportunities all the way. But what we need to do is, that's a good. So if we want to fix the class situation, it's not about bringing everyone down, which is the socialist way, making everyone equally poor. What I believe in is the conservative way, small c, of giving everyone a hand up, not a handout. So helping people better their lives if that's what they choose to do. Some people might not want to become middle class, or whatever that means these days. Some people might be happy living their life the way they are. We shouldn't make assumptions about them.
Kelvin, it's been a pleasure to hear your viewpoints on this show, and thank you for enlightening us. And some people will be probably angry at what you said, others will be bolstered by it, and hopefully they'll contribute to the discussion under the line on the YouTube channel that this will come out on. Thank you for joining us today.
Martin, can I just end on the note that I'm happy to be proven wrong, and I'm not saying I'm right in everything. I would love to hear how people think my ideas are wrong, but please don't attack my personal immutable characteristics, as people often do. Attack my arguments, and I'll hear you out, and I'll debate with you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Kelvin.
Cheers.